Thank you so much for joining today's program. My name is Kelly Anderson, and I am a Senior Director of Health and Drug Policy at the U.S. Chamber's Global Innovation Policy Center. We are so honored to be joined today by Congressman Brad Schneider and an esteemed group of panelists to discuss the innovation ecosystem in Illinois. I think many people are probably unaware that the research to develop the next generation of breakthrough treatments and cures is taking place right now in their local communities. So our conversation today will discuss the innovative research that's taking place in the Congressman's district and across Illinois more broadly, and the public policy framework that's needed to sustain that investment in innovation. Today's program is being hosted in partnership with the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce. So I would like to welcome Jack Lavin, the president and CEO of the Chicagoland Chamber, for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Kelly. And hello, everyone. I'm Jack Lavin, president and CEO of the Chicagoland Chamber. And it is great to be here with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and all of you. Medical innovation happens in communities across America, including in our own backyard in Illinois' 10th Congressional District. Our businesses and universities are driving the development of today's life-saving COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics, and are continuing to work around the clock to discover and deliver the needed breakthrough treatments and cures of tomorrow. These accomplishments don't happen by accident. America's innovation ecosystem empowers new medical breakthroughs by encouraging collaboration and supporting access to a vast network of supply chains of businesses, large and small. It also enables innovation through a robust intellectual property system that attracts investment to cutting-edge technological fields. With the legal framework in place, we can empower new breakthroughs in our own backyard to keep America innovating. America's innovation ecosystem supports local jobs, underpins economic growth, and drives our shared economic competitiveness. Today, the U.S. biopharmaceutical industry directly employs more than 800,000 Americans, and the industry supports more than 3 million additional jobs across the United States in sectors as varied as construction to transportation to manufacturing. Several of these companies are in our own backyard: Abbott, AbbVie, Astellas, AstraZeneca, Horizon, Novo Norfolk, Pfizer, Novartis, and Walgreens. In fact, there are more than 245,000 direct and indirect biopharmaceutical jobs right here in Illinois. In addition, 11 pharmaceutical and biotech construction projects valued at $1.5 billion are occurring in our state of Illinois. And these projects in our state supported nearly $71.8 million in union wages. The COVID-19 pandemic illustrated that working together, we can achieve more. Collaboration to identify the next breakthrough treatment or cure is happening right now in our community. For innovative research to continue, the scientific community is counting on great leaders like our guest today, Congressman Brad Schneider, to support policies that respect intellectual property and promote continued investment in innovation. We encourage you to support policy proposals that preserve U.S. leadership in medical innovation and protect the free market principles upon which the U.S. innovation ecosystem is built. I am excited to hear Congressman Schneider of Illinois' 10th Congressional District, who I have known for many years. I also want to take a moment to thank Congressman Schneider for all his support of the business community. When I called for help for the business community, he responded during the pandemic and economic crisis. Small businesses with PPP, the airlines, manufacturing, retail, restaurants, hospitality, he was there to help. Now we have the needed infrastructure bill, support for higher education, and our national research labs in Chicagoland, Fermi, and Argonne. Congressman Schneider has been a champion for the business community. We are grateful for all you do, Congressman Schneider. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today and share the Chicagoland Chamber's passion for exploring Illinois' innovation ecosystem. Thank you to the U.S. Chamber for this program and all the great work you do for the business community across the country. Now, please join me in welcoming Frank Cullen, Vice President of U.S. Policy for Global Innovation for the Global Innovation Policy Center at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Frank?
Thank you, Jack. And before we get started with our discussion, I want to thank you for your leadership and also to the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce for agreeing to co-host today's event. We're very excited to partner with you for this event, and just want to thank you for your leadership. In addition to that, I certainly want to thank and reiterate your thanks to the Congressman for his leadership and for all Congress has done to help all Americans get through this pandemic. We have a program at the Chamber that talks about the all-of-nation response to the COVID-19 crisis. But as my colleague Kelly said, this is happening at every state and every district in America as we deal with an unprecedented crisis. So we're delighted to have the Congressman here to share his perspectives. I'll introduce him in just a moment to hear some of his comments before doing a quick Q&A. But before doing so, I just want to reiterate that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Global Innovation Policy Center believes that innovation and creativity, which are getting us through this crisis, are supported and really driven by a robust intellectual property system. This allows us to have breakthrough cures and treatments, technological innovations that allow us to hold meetings such as this, to work remotely, to educate our kids, and to just connect with family. That type of connectivity through 5G wouldn't be possible without our IP system supporting innovation. And of course, our creative industries have helped support, entertain, and really get us through some pretty dark times over the last year and a half. There's some really exciting news happening on the innovation front. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But now it's my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome Congressman Brad Schneider and ask him to share a few of his thoughts about what's top of mind for the Congress. There's certainly a lot more going on than just the COVID crisis, and also what's happening specifically in his district. So again, Congressman, thanks for all you're doing. Thanks for all the great work on behalf of your constituents, and welcome.
Frank, thank you. Thanks for the kind words. I want to thank Jack for his leadership and also his collaboration and working together. As he mentioned, we face a crisis unprecedented in our history with the COVID pandemic, now well into its second year. Again, as Jack mentioned, if we're going to support American families, if we're going to support American workers, we need to support the businesses and industries those workers drive and depend upon to earn their living. One of the things I've always been committed to is making sure that we are leading in innovation, that we're inventing things here, making things here, and have the capacity and infrastructure to ship them around the world. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Obviously, we face immediate priorities. As soon as we finish here, I'm headed to the airport to head to Washington. We need to pass the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan bill that we helped move over to the Senate passed, and it's back at the House, and we need to make sure that it passes the House. We need to continue to work to fight the pandemic. Good news today that the FDA gave final approval for the Pfizer vaccine. I hope that gets more people taking the vaccine. That is our best weapon in beating back the virus. But as I mentioned, if we're going to drive American workers, give them the opportunities to succeed and prosper, we need infrastructure, and we need fair trade policies. On the Ways and Means Committee, I'm very pleased to be in a position to do that. Legislatively, obviously the American Rescue Plan that passed Congress earlier this year has had a big impact. It's put more than 350 million shots into people's arms. It's provided continued assistance to our small businesses, and we're seeing economic growth. But we're not out of the woods. We've got a long way still to go, and that's why continuing to work together, finding ways, like in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, to reach across the aisle and do things together is so critical. And that includes, in particular, supporting our small businesses that are the engine of our economy. Every single community across my district, our state, and the nation, the heartbeat are small businesses, those local enterprises that fill our main streets, but also the small businesses that start out with a kernel of an idea, drive research, and could lead to the next breakthrough. And that's important as well. In the 10th district alone, we've helped more than 92,000 small business jobs, which is obviously critically important. But it's also our larger industries. In my district, as was mentioned before, we have what I call the life sciences corridor. If you're driving north on the highway from O'Hare Airport, you know you've reached my district when you see the Estellas building on the left-hand side of the highway. And as was mentioned, you'll pass Baxter and you'll pass Horizon Pharma, and you won't see some of the smaller companies along the way. But at the north end of the district, you're going to see Abbott Park. And if you turn right, you'll head towards AbbVie. And if you turn left, you'll head to another large Baxter facility. It is one of the largest employers in my district. I am proud of the work we're doing. Everything from developing tests for COVID, like Abbott has done, developing treatments for rare diseases. Again, going back to small businesses that then look for a bigger platform. The treatment, genetic treatment for SMA was invented in my district. It is a cure for a horrible genetic disease that gives young people a chance of a lifetime. And those are the things that we need to continue to promote and develop. So I understand the importance of innovation, to start with the basic science, understanding, creating the knowledge, take that knowledge to applied science. How can we figure out what's going to make a difference in people's lives, whether it is treatments for COVID, prevention, vaccines for COVID, treatments or cures for cancer. We're looking at fighting lifelong chronic diseases such as diabetes or end of life diseases such as Alzheimer's, all that have a threat to our long-term future and affect families day in and day out. But the research, the development, the ideas that will lead us through to the treatments and cures for these horrible diseases are happening in our country. And it's because of the partnership we can create with small businesses, with larger businesses, with the government, with really smart, energetic, innovative Americans figuring out how we can take ourselves to a better future. So with that, let me open up would love to have a broader conversation, hear what other people are thinking.
Well, Congressman, thank you for those comments, and we certainly agree with you. I'm so delighted you touched on the role of small business. Many folks think of the Chamber as a big business organization, but our membership encompasses businesses of all sizes. And you're right, so much of the research and so much of the innovation does occur at those small businesses that then partner with larger industry to bring some of those new treatments and new drugs to market. So it's so important that we have a recognition of the role of small business. And you also just touched on the importance of clinical research in your community, how critical it has been to delivering best-in-class treatments for COVID-19. One of the things that I know is also going on in response to the global pandemic is studies in your district across a whole wide array of health challenges, not just COVID. I understand that in your district, there's a study amongst 6 facilities analyzing the role of mRNA, which of course played a huge role in the development of vaccines in breast cancer. And so I think you touched on it already, but can you talk just a little bit more, perhaps share some of the economic benefits, some of the benefits that exist? You certainly touched on the importance of public and private partnerships, but what do you believe is important that we have these cutting edge clinical trials in your district, and how do those trials benefit your community?
Yeah, so I'll tell a couple of quick stories as I work my way to the answer, but we had a town hall a couple of weeks ago, and that someone there, I call on everyone, and woman had raised her hand and she said, I have a whole bunch of questions and issues. But where she started with was the concern about the vaccine and saying, this thing came so fast. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know what science is behind it. And I was very pleased to be able to explain to her the substance and depth of science around mRNA, and how this isn't something that just appeared out of the wilderness overnight, but we've been working on for literally generations. To understand and the implication it's going to have, and that it's far more broad than just a vaccine for COVID. mRNA, we're going to hear about it long into the future, and hopefully it is going to be a transformative watershed initiative. Second story is my mother is a breast cancer survivor. She's doing great. She's 8 years out, but I understand the threat breast cancer have, and I have so many friends who have been diagnosed with breast cancer, and thank goodness have gotten a decent prognosis and are working their way through it. But it's a constant struggle to understand and figure out are there better ways to screen, to diagnose, to prevent, to address all cancers, but breast cancer in particular. And the ability to apply the mRNA technology, something that we've been working on again for a generation, depends on the ability to do clinical tests, to understand what are the impacts it's going to have on individuals. So I think this is extraordinary work. I'm proud that it's happening in my district. As I mentioned earlier, I'm proud that 3 of the vaccines that are helping us beat back COVID are invented in the United States. These aren't accidents. They are a function of the investment we make, both as a nation through our government and through private industry to find ways to improve people's lives. And it's something we need to continue to work on.
You know, Congressman, I'd like to follow up on that for just a moment. You know, it's great to see the innovation ecosystem thriving in your district. And later in the program, we're going to hear from leaders from the venture capital and biotech communities who spearheaded some of the groundbreaking work that's going on in Illinois 10. You know, across the innovative and creative industries, intellectual property protection is key to helping support the research, the development, the creativity that goes into new products, new tests, therapeutics, and vaccines, and a whole wide range of other creative and innovative output. Can you tell me a little bit about the ways that IP policy has helped sustain the investment in R&D in your own district and the important role IP plays in terms of supporting our economy?
Absolutely, and it plays out on a number of levels or layers, if you will. You know, start with the research that's being done at university campuses around the country and in laboratories. You've got people who are really smart, motivated by a love of science, but also a passion wanting to make a difference in the world. But a lot of these ideas or hypotheses that you need to follow to try to track down and develop new science and new technologies are very expensive. And so the collaboration and the investment we make as a nation, whether it's R&D tax credits or other incentives to drive that, are really important. So that the first layer is saying knowledge, technology, experimentation, and failure and lessons from our failures are things that we're willing to make an investment in. At the same time, I think this is one of the things that has given us a national advantage in the global competition, and something we need to work very hard to always protect, is the ability to take intellectual property, assign ownership to it for those who have taken the risk, who have put in the work, who have had those sleepless nights or you know, difficult challenges of failure and success followed by failure and more success and moving along, to make sure that they can protect the work that they've done and reap the due rewards. And that's something that we have long believed in as a nation, and something we need to continue to ensure moving forward. So the idea of investing in R&D, investing in intellectual property and protecting intellectual property, and then creating more avenues, more vehicles, more abilities for people to commercialize and deliver those ideas to the world. And by the way, that's true whether it is the next medical treatment or medical cure, or some transformative technology that's going to maybe, for example, allow us to remotely sit wherever we happen to be right now and speak to each other on a computer or an iPad. All of these things, you know, no one knew Zoom would make a difference in our lives like it has the last 2 years, because no one anticipated the pandemic. But thank God we've had, whether it's Zoom or WebEx or any of these others, and thank God they're competing with each other, because it gets better over time. So the protection of intellectual property is just as key as the investment in R&D.
Well, we certainly couldn't agree more with that. You know, it's interesting when we talk about biopharmaceutical innovation, a lot of people think we're just talking about scientists and how they're working in the lab. But it's interesting to note that while the biopharmaceutical industry supports over 40,000 jobs in Illinois alone, it also helps support the local economy in a wide variety of ways. You know, for example, pharmaceutical construction projects supported 71.8 million in union wages over a 5-year period. And additionally, biopharmaceutical industry's network of vendors throughout the supply chain supported nearly 1.2 trillion in spending in your district alone. And you know, you've stated that one of your top priorities for the year is empowering America's economic recovery. And before asking you the question, I just want to again say thank you on behalf of the U.S. Chamber for what you and your colleagues in Congress have done to address not only a health crisis, but also an economic crisis and a real tragedy for many people in America that they had to deal with things that were completely unexpected in terms of their working situation and other economic impacts. So thank you for your leadership. But can you tell us a little bit more about the role the innovative community will play in reinvigorating the economy in your very own district?
Absolutely. Like I said, I'm very proud of what I call the life sciences corridor. That is a pharmaceutical, medical device. A lot of companies in my district, one of our largest employers. But we have a lot of different industries in the district. In fact, the last ranking I saw had the 10th district of Illinois ranked number 6 in the nation for the highest concentration of manufacturing jobs. And these aren't smokestack 20th century manufacturing jobs. These are 21st century, high skilled, high value, many small businesses that are making things and shipping them literally around the world. And it's how we're going to continue to grow our economy. The innovation, the increase in productivity, the making sure that U.S. workers and U.S. companies can not just stay competitive in the post-COVID economy, but lead in that economy and compete with companies, whether they're located in China or Europe or Africa, Latin America, it doesn't matter where. I want to make sure that our U.S. companies can compete. So there's a lot of things that from a policymaker standpoint we can do to support that. Part of it is making sure that our trade policy promotes American companies and make sure that we're competitive on that global stage, able to introduce our products into new markets around the world. It's making sure that our workforce is well trained and can not just keep pace, but it can lead on efforts of new ideas, new products, new technologies, but also staying ahead of the curve on productivity. It's making sure that our infrastructure is in place, and that's the roads, rails, seaports, airports to move product around, get it to places so we can ship it around the world. But it's also making sure that we're, again, the education, starting with preschool to kindergarten, making sure that every 4th grader transitions from learning to read to reading to learn, that everyone who wants to go on and pursue a career, whether it's in the trades and science and in commerce, whatever it might be, that we're giving those people the skills and lessons they need to succeed year after year. So all of those things come together to make sure that we're helping small businesses in particular. That has been a focus of mine. Small businesses create 55% of the new jobs in our country. I use the example of Exis. I forgot in the beginning, SMA stands for spinal muscular atrophy. And small company here, a group of people came together and developed a technology, a treatment that literally cures SMA, a disease that if without treatment leads to death around age 2. And they're now working on taking that technology and, like with mRNA, applying it to other diseases, other treatments. There are so many other stories like that in our district where people who have taken skills they've learned and applying it to something they care about, maybe for personal reasons or just something they think they have an idea to address. And we need to make sure we continue to promote them.
Well, absolutely. And, I think most people don't realize that, and you touched on this earlier, the number of failures that occur as folks try to work on these various cures and new treatments, and the fact that you have such a huge investment that's made both by the government and in some cases multiplied many times in the private sector to try to bring these new treatments, vaccines, drugs to market. It's a huge, huge process that has a lot of moving pieces, and the failure rate is quite high, and the cost runs into the billions of dollars. So whether it's a small business partnering with a larger concern, whether it's government research that's foundational to getting there, this type of partnership is what's really getting us through this crisis. You touched a moment ago on trade, and we're so grateful for your work as a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. And you understand very clearly the importance of international trade to Illinois' economy and to your own district. What role do you think trade policy can play in bolstering the U.S. economy and strengthening global health in the next, say, decade?
Great question. Trade policy is critical for us to succeed. I can talk about healthcare. I can talk about it. Illinois, as you know, is a big agricultural state. whether it's corn, whether it's soy. The markets for our products around the world, we're 5% of the global population. If we can invent it here, make it here, grow it here, and get it around the world, it's good for our farmers, it's good for our businesses, it's good for all our workers, it's good for our communities. And so trade policy becomes critical. First thing is working to make sure we always have a level playing field, that American companies can compete. I'm not looking to tilt the field one way or the other. I know when the rules are fair, we can compete, and we can most times win because of our workers, our innovation, all the things we've talked about already. We need to make sure as we look at tax policy, not just trade policy, that we're leveling the field and that we're ensuring American companies are competitive. We have to, with tax policy and trade policy, make sure we have the resources to fund that infrastructure I've been talking about along the way, to make sure that we're investing in R&D, that we're educating, investing in education, so we have the scientists and the technologists and everything else to drive that. All of that works together. And so if we're thinking again in a global holistic way, what is going to ensure that American families, American workers, American companies have the ability to engage in a post-COVID global economy with ideas, with product, with access to markets? We're doing our job right. And we're going to make sure that we're empowering our workers, our companies, and also making sure that we are pushing back against other countries that may be trying to tilt the field to their advantage.
Well, Congressman, I know you have a very busy schedule ahead. I know you're traveling back to DC today, and certainly taking time to speak with us this morning. It's been fascinating. You know, we haven't even touched on things like the threat to the constituents in your district from counterfeit products during the COVID crisis, whether they're PPEs or they are even vaccines or things as mundane as toilet paper. You know, you have a whole variety of counterfeits that are coming out onto the market as a result of the COVID crisis, changing the way people purchase so that they sometimes are purchasing sight unseen online. More and more, we're seeing counterfeits working their way into that supply chain. So that's a serious problem. We haven't talked at all about, you know, the overall role that IP plays, or IP intensive industries play in our broader economy. You know, 44 million jobs, 38% of our GDP, well over half of our trade. And you just talked about the importance of trade. There's so much more we could talk about today, but we so appreciate your insights and also your leadership. Before we close out, I'd like to give you the opportunity for the last word. If there's nothing that I've asked or anything that we've touched on that you'd like to expand on, now's your chance to close us out for this section, Congressman. And again, it's really a delight and a pleasure. And thank you so much for taking time to chat with me, but I give you the final word.
Well, Frank, thank you. And you're absolutely right. There's so much more we can talk on. If it was easy, we'd be done and could all go spend time at the beach. These are hard challenges, and we are facing a health crisis. With the pandemic, we're facing an economic crisis, as you touched on. Many of the things that we have done at a federal level, the state level, even local communities have helped us navigate this crisis, but we have a long way to go. We haven't been perfect. We need to learn from those mistakes, but we have, you know, our economy is back to the size it was before the pandemic, and we need to do everything we can to protect our American workers, protect those small businesses that are just struggling to hang on, and make sure that everyone can get to the other side of this pandemic and face an economy prepared to grow long into the future. That comes from innovation and many of the other things that we've talked about. If I can add one thing, and we really haven't talked about it, but it's crucially important. We also have to find a way to bring people together. That is true politically, left side of the aisle, right side of the aisle. It is true geographically, north, south, east, west, big cities, small towns. We're all in this together. And I think the pandemic has showed that. But I think also the response to the pandemic, especially within the pharmaceutical industry globally, but particularly here in the United States, as people have come together and worked incredibly hard. We mentioned Pfizer getting that FDA approval today. They have produced, last report I heard, which is about a month old, more than 3 billion vaccines in less than a year. Right? That includes the scientists who did the research, the clinical trials, the physicians, et cetera, who made sure it was safe, but also it includes the people who are making that vaccine and all the people who are distributing that vaccine, getting it around the country, around the world, and putting it into people's arms. that's coming together, and that's what we need to do more of. So it's always good to see you, to see Jack, and to work together. I'm an optimist by nature. I know our best days are ahead of us. Hard days lie ahead as well. But if we stand together, we work together, we work shoulder to shoulder, there's nothing we can't conquer and nothing we can't do. So it's good to be with you.
Thank you, Congressman. Safe travels to DC. And thanks also for your leadership on the infrastructure bill. Chamber's all behind you on that, and we look forward to continued partnership. Thank you so much, Congressman Schneider.
Thank you. We're going to get it done.
Excellent. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce my colleague, Kelly Anderson, who will moderate our next panel. Kelly?
Great. Thanks so much, Frank. And Congressman, let me echo Frank's thoughts for your thoughtful remarks and for joining the conversation today. I think, I too am an optimist, and I agree that we really do need to find ways to bring people together. And I think the panel that we're about to have will show how some of the different actors across Illinois have helped come together to respond to emerging public health threats. So to continue our great conversation today, I'm so honored to be joined by Nancy Sullivan, who's the CEO and Managing Director of Illinois Ventures, and John Gardiner, who's a Vice President at Lake County Building Trades. So we have a lot to cover today, so I think we'll just jump right in. So Nancy, let me start with you.
Sure.
So my colleague Frank mentioned earlier that, when people think of innovation, they sometimes think of just the scientists in the lab. And the Congressman touched on this at the end there, that, it's not just the scientists, but, it's the people that help make the vaccine and distribute it and get it in arms. But I think people are probably unaware of the role that venture capital has played in furthering healthcare innovation. So can you tell us a little bit about your work at Illinois Ventures and the role that VC plays in the innovation ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who may not know, Illinois Ventures is the venture capital arm of the University of Illinois. It was a trailblazing idea when they started out of the university 20 years ago. And the plan was to start investing in the amazing ideas that Illinois is producing. And by Illinois, we actually mean across the state. We primarily fund out of the University of Illinois, but not exclusively. And we're looking to put our dollars behind the ideas that are the complex R&D projects that are coming from our research institutions that have a chance to transform our lives. And venture capital plays a key role, but not a role on its own. And in many cases, dollars are needed to get these ideas to the next level. You heard the Congressman talk about what it takes to get a pharmaceutical over the transom into the marketplace and the failures around it and why intellectual property comes into play. And on the venture side, I like to say Illinois Ventures plays the role of a fire starter. Our ability to come in early with dollars is really designed to bring in other capital into the ideas that we're creating in the state. And so for every dollar we put to work, 36 other dollars have gone to work, and which means over $2 billion have gone into the companies we've supported. And what venture capital does and where it really makes an impact in is being able to, one, fund the next generation. Those discoveries that have occurred at our premier institutions are great, but they're not ready to get to make a difference in human lives. They have to go through that process of whether it be the FDA, whether it be go to market, all of the pieces. And the initial capital to start that process is typically venture capital. And we like to put some early stage dollars in to attract lots of money from across both the US and actually internationally to move the ideas to the marketplace. And without it, I don't see these ideas really being able to translate. The next piece is when you talk about what the Congressman talked in his own district and what's happening up north in some of our pharma, they're the key partners for these early stage companies. So when you think of the biopharmaceutical ideas that are generating from our universities, getting initial venture capital, to get them into humans and to get them into that marketplace to make the difference, we're typically partnering with large pharma. And a lot of those companies up north are our best partners in moving these ideas forward. So I see venture capital as a fire starter from early innovation into the marketplace to save lives in the health area.
That's so interesting, Nancy. And I really like the point that you made about for every $1 invested, there's X more contributed to the economy. I think people don't think about kind of the spillover effects. So John, let me bring you into the conversation here. So earlier in the program, the Congressman spoke about the range of actors that support biopharmaceutical innovation. And my colleague has referenced a study that shows that pharmaceutical construction supported nearly $1.5 billion in investment and $71.8 million in union wages in Illinois. So again, this is an angle I think that people think a lot about. So can you maybe tell us a little bit more about the role that labor plays in supporting innovation and the local jobs in Illinois?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you. So I'm a business agent for Local 1 Ironworkers, and I also serve as the Vice President of Lake County Construction Building Trades. We're a collaboration of 18 different labor unions representing over 100,000 members across Lake County, Cook County, Northeast Illinois. One thing I'd like to point out, which is vitally important, is it was mentioned several times, $71.8 million in wages, and most important part, or very important, equally important part of the wages is also the fringe benefit package, which is included in that. That is contributions that go toward all of our members' health and welfare plans, which provide health insurance for our members and their loved ones. These plans provide access to all the vital pharmaceuticals our members and their loved ones need, whether it's life-saving emergency room medicines, diabetes therapies, maintenance drugs, specialty drugs. These projects that are undertaken and collaboratively performed through the industry and construction unions, thereby are, they're providing not just a wealthier society, but a healthier society. They're enabling our members to get the healthcare they need, and it's just very beneficial. As far as the role the labor unions play between our rigorous apprenticeship programs and our journeyman upgrading and refresher courses, we provide just an unmatched skill and talent level to perform these complex projects that are designed and planned. And that, along with the local access and the reliability of the contractors that employ our members, it's just a very positive relationship, and invigorates the local economy as well.
Yeah, John, that's so interesting. I think one of the things that we talk a lot about at the GIPC is that, intellectual property intensive industries help create not just jobs, but good jobs, right? And those good jobs, as you referenced, come with a whole range of benefits. And I think, maybe people don't always think about all of the extra impact that those jobs can have on families, on their health, and on the community. So
wealth without health, what do you have, really, right?
Exactly. It's so true. So Nancy, let me turn it back to you. So, as part of this Discover and Deliver series, the Chamber's been trying to tell the story of the life-changing biopharmaceutical innovation that is taking place in communities across the country to make sure that people have the health that is so important. I think you probably have your finger on the pulse of many promising healthcare innovations that are being developed right here in Illinois. So I'd be really interested to see if you could provide us with a peek inside the pipeline, perhaps, and tell us about one or two of the innovations that you're really excited about, that you think have the power to be a really, truly life-changing treatment.
Okay, so this is the question that makes me pinch myself that I get to do what I do for a living. I work with very smart people who are changing the face of healthcare, and her passion drives them to do this 24/7. And trying to think of a couple is so hard for me because we have a portfolio filled with what's coming out of Illinois. And I will tell you, the rest of the world is starting to really take notice. So I'll highlight a few of them, but if anyone wants to connect afterwards, I can talk for hours. I'm going to start at the University of Illinois. As we've all been living through this pandemic, we've developed a saliva test that was used to keep the institution open throughout COVID and to provide testing. We didn't stop there. We actually rolled that out through universities across Illinois, community colleges who want to use it, and developed a company that could roll it out throughout the country and internationally. So our innovators heard and saw a need, came together, three main innovators, to develop this saliva test that has since rolled out and kept the state running in many ways, especially the university. One of those gentlemen is a prolific inventor who should be shined upon because he has also developed and has effectively commercialized, moving it forward. It will have to go through FDA, a revolutionary treatment in the oncology space. It is an undruggable target that they've gone after and have moved that company to the point that it is now public, and it's called Revolution Medicines. So discovered right down in Champaign is what we consider to be the next generation oncology treatment that's already made it to go public. And as I speak of him, he didn't stop there. He has since developed the next generation technology for fungal infections. So a number of fungal infections are life-threatening. They're not the simple ones we think about. These are killing people across the globe every day. And he is in partnership with ourselves and another large investor working on next generation treatments for those life-threatening fungal infections. He's also spent his time looking at cystic fibrosis. For those of you familiar in the healthcare system, we have seen amazing advances in cystic fibrosis in the last decade, so much so that it is transforming the lives of patients. There is a subpopulation where the existing drug does not work. And he has put his time, energy, and effort in looking at ways to treat that subpopulation. So you're seeing in Illinois some of the most interesting biopharma breakthroughs. And that is from one inventor that I focus on. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time in the news. Most recently, I'd say it's within the last month, we saw a fast track designation for an oncology pancreatic cancer phase 2 drug that was developed from the University of Illinois at Chicago and Northwestern jointly, Actuate Therapeutics, as well as one of our interesting devices is a company called Psionic. It was founded by a student at the University of Illinois. It is the next generation prosthetic, allowing for feedback for the user to sense and feel what is happening in their hand as a prosthetic. And I bring this up because as we think about where we stand in time today, their product will launch on September 1st and be available. One of their first users of the product in testing was a retired Army Sergeant, Garrett Anderson. And he had lost his arm in a roadside bomb in Iraq in 2005. Today, he uses Psionic's arm. He's been using it for years. It will be commercially available on September 1st, developed in Illinois, being exploited and grown in Illinois. And as we see our CEO, this is one thing we always hear about in the innovation space. Yeah, but is the Midwest and Illinois really known? He's been recognized by MIT Technology Reviews and named 35 of under 35 top innovators. And so what I want to say is when we just focus on a few of them, I can tell you these diamonds and these rich stories, but it goes so deep that we're sitting at a time that health can be transformed right by Illinois, right in the district, working with each other. And what I really enjoyed was the conversation at the end that we come together. None of these happen alone. There has to be a discovery, there has to be investment, there needs to be the infrastructure, the space in order to develop the wet lab space. And then together we take them to the market to make a difference in the world.
There's so much to be proud of in Illinois, and you can tell that you're very passionate about all the great work that you do. You mentioned cystic fibrosis. We have a family friend who's had cystic fibrosis her whole life, went from being on the transplant list for a new lung to taking a new medicine for cystic fibrosis, and is a perfectly well-functioning adult. And that's the power of medical innovation, right? And I think it always helps to be able to put a story with the broader context about pharmaceutical research and development. So John, let me bring it back to you. I think it's pretty clear that the labor industry really plays a vital role in biopharmaceutical innovation in Illinois. And another one of the pieces that we've been talking a lot about as part of our Discover and Deliver campaign is the way that vendors across the supply chain help support biopharmaceutical innovation, but also underpin the local economy. I think we all know that manufacturing innovative medicines is incredibly complex and requires state-of-the-art facilities in order to do so safely and effectively. So I was just interested if you could tell us a little bit about some of the vendors in the labor community that you work with that help to build these facilities, to maybe shed a little more light on the vast supply chain upon which the innovative industry relies.
Sure. So obviously the workers on site directly benefit from the projects that are undertaken, and the secondary beneficiary of those projects are the vendors, suppliers, distributors, whether it's a concrete plant that employs laborers and Teamster concrete truck drivers, steel fabricators in the area that supply all the rebar and structural steel, the pipe trades, electrical trades that require conduit and pipe from local distributors. Those vendors who are local, the impact on the wider commerce outside the gates of the plant is almost immeasurable. All these dollars that are spent on these projects have just such a ripple effect across the community. The supply chain for my trade, specifically the iron workers, Waukegan Steel is located in Lake County, very close to, it's in the life science corridor, as Congressman Schneider referred. North Chicago Steel, another fabricator. These companies employ dozens of steel workers in their plants, in their facility. The money that's invested, the money that they earn, it's earned locally, it's spent locally, and it stays in the community, which obviously is a big boost to the local economy, keeping it vibrant and healthy. And these facilities, specifically AbbVie and Baxter, they employ, outside of like was mentioned, there was the projects that were targeted or in the study, $1.5 billion worth. That's only 11 projects. There's also hundreds of millions of dollars spent over the course of those 5 years on maintenance, renovation, just general upkeep. So it's a constant flow of dollars into the community and into our workers and the vendors' pockets. So it's almost immeasurable in keeping the community vibrant, and it's a great thing.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear about the real impact that this has on the local community. I like what you said about earned locally and spent locally. Kind of takes me back to what the congressman said about how, the innovations are made here and then delivered to the world. But I think, it goes to show that the contributions that are happening in your local community in Illinois do have ripple effects, both on the local economy, but also in the innovations that can be delivered to patients around the world. And that's a really neat part of the story, which we don't always get to talk about. So thank you for making that point. So Nancy, let me come back to you. So earlier in the program, we discussed with the congressman the framework that's needed to sustain this investment in the next generation of biopharmaceutical innovation to help, all of these great innovations that you've discussed that are in the pipeline. I think we would love to hear from you about the role that intellectual property has played in the development and commercialization of this innovative technology, because I think, a certain public policy framework is needed in order for that great innovation to continue. So we'd love your thoughts there.
Everything I mentioned and just about everything we invest in is backed by intellectual property. The intellectual property provides a protection to the idea and the discovery and an allowance for an individual to move it forward, for us to invest and know that we'll have exclusivity. So everything I talked about and everything we invest in, one of the top criteria is, what is the intellectual property? What's the quality of the intellectual property? Because I think the congressman hit on it earlier. This is something that could take many, many years, especially in the biopharmaceutical area. You may have a binary outcome and billions of dollars put in. So if you're going to take on all of the R&D risk and all of the risk in going through the regulatory and pieces, you have to know at the back end, you have a point of exclusivity and protection to be able to then be able to recoup some of that, to be able to have the time and the energy to move forward and have that exclusivity. And one thing I think sometimes what people forget in intellectual property is a patent actually requires you to do a disclosure of the invention. And that in that patent is the information around that invention that will allow in the future for people to build upon and grow upon. If you look at in some of the intellectual property that we've been involved in, it's because of other discoveries that weren't done in the labs of those individuals, but they were able to build upon and use it as background. And you can license from those groups that background intellectual property to build and grow and do things on top of. And so in the pharmaceutical area, I actually have seen that quite a bit, where there's additional patenting on top of, and then you have combination of drugs coming together in different pieces. So for us, intellectual property is an imperative so that you can have the opportunity, if you're going to invest. The money we invest come from limited partners who are looking for a return. That exclusivity provides part of the return, but also ensures the dollars will come in so that this research can come to fruition in the marketplace and that the investment occurs. So it's incredibly important for what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we at the Global Innovation Policy Center spend our days working to advocate for the importance of intellectual property protection because of the vital role that it plays, as you just discussed. So John, let me turn back to you. So, I think as the congressman kind of mentioned at the end of his comments, that, we need to find things around which we can all come together. And I think, in response to the pandemic, we've certainly seen the great role of collaboration. and how that has been so critical to developing, treatments and vaccines for COVID-19 in record time. So just be interested to see if you could speak a little bit about the role of collaboration between the pharmaceutical industry, the local government, and the unions, and how that not only helped facilitate a really rapid response to the pandemic, but is also going to be critical to the partnership, for that partnership continuing to develop the next generation of treatments and cures.
Sure. So as you may know, during the pandemic and continuing through this pandemic, construction workers were deemed essential workers by local government and state government. So we continue to build buildings and bridges and roadways, and still continue to do that, through today. The precautions that were taken to protect our workers were a collaboration between local government, developers, general contractors, owners, labor unions, to figure out how to continue these projects in a safe and efficient manner, while, of course, keeping the health of our members the utmost importance, and their families when they return back home to them. So there was many measures taken as far as expanding lunchroom facilities, working staggered shifts, discouraging carpooling, even as much as getting additional porta potties on the projects, if we can go that far. But there was a lot of steps taken, and it was a collaboration between everyone to keep projects moving forward. And some of them are vitally important because they include new medical office buildings, immediate care centers, medical distribution facilities, the largest of which being one we did in Grays Lake, Illinois. It's a 1.5 million square foot Medline distribution facility, which was done in 2020 and 21. And it was done efficiently and safely. Obviously, it's going to serve a large portion of the Midwest region and continuing to deliver the vital medical supplies that are needed throughout the region. Between our building trades, Lake County building trades, and Cook County building trades, in collaboration with local government, we also facilitated and sponsored vaccination events to keep the members and encourage them to attend and keep the job sites safe and healthy for everybody. And it was just a very good, it really brought, like the Congressman said, it did bring a lot of people together that might not have otherwise been as cooperative or have the conversations that we needed to have. And it was a really great thing. And we continue to look forward to those relationships being fostered in that way.
Absolutely. I think, if there's any silver lining to the pandemic, it has been all of the great collaboration that we've seen and bringing people together in a way that, maybe hasn't happened before.
Yep.
Nancy, I noticed we had one question from the audience, so if you don't mind indulging me. They were asking about the role that Bayh-Dole has played in furthering innovation. Do you at Illinois Ventures work with the Bayh-Dole legislation at all?
Actually, quite a bit, because Bayh-Dole enabled universities to own the intellectual property that they have developed through federal dollars. So the majority of the intellectual property that we're commercializing is because the University of Illinois owned them through Bayh-Dole and is able to work through that commercialization process. So Bayh-Dole has transformed the ability of universities to take their ideas and move them to the marketplace through the ownership Bayh-Dole allowed them to have. And frankly, they also suggested through Bayh-Dole and required that there be a sharing. So at the university, anything that is made on the intellectual property, it's shared between the university and the innovators who have developed it in terms of financially around that. So we depend upon it. We believe it transformed the ability to create startups, to create the cures we're seeing. And if we did not have that, we really feel like there would have been a backlog in taking this intellectual property to the marketplace.
Yeah, I think, Bayh-Dole is a really good example of a place where, there's a piece of legislation and then the impact was real, right? You could see it happening, giving the university ownership of these innovations, and then the innovations eventually come into the marketplace. So it's cool to kind of see public policy in action and see concrete results like that. And John, perhaps just before we close, it occurred to me, I asked Nancy what she was most excited about in the work that she does, but would be interested to hear, what sets your heart on fire in the work that you do when it comes to furthering innovation.
Well, we love big projects. Big projects gets our blood flowing. But no, we just we look forward to the continuing relationship with the pharmaceuticals and the good work they do, and the high quality of craftsmanship that they insist on and demand out of our members and out of our unions We're proud of that relationship that we have with them, and we're glad that they're continue to engage with us, and we just look forward to continuing that relationship.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys both again so much for joining this panel today. I think I learned a lot as part of the discussion, and we'll look forward to staying in touch with you for future conversations about innovation in Illinois.
Thank you very much as well.
Yeah, of course.
Thank
So
you.
to close out our program here, we're joined again by the Congressman. Congressman, any closing remarks you would like to add before you jet off to DC?
Well, Kelly, thank you. And again, thanks to John and to Nancy for your comments and remarks. John, for the work your members do across our district. We're seeing it every day, everywhere we go. So thanks for that leadership. And Nancy, you were talking about, are we known for our technology here in the Midwest? We are, and more people are knowing about it. And I chuckled when you said he was recognized as 36 under 36. Yeah, and it's young people. It's not just young people though. We got all ages. There's a lot going on here, and that's why I'm so excited. I'll keep emphasizing that life sciences corridor we are building out in Northern Illinois in the 10th district. That is our future, but we're seeing hubs like that popping up across the country. And it's because as a nation, we know the value of innovation and protecting that innovation and making sure that we're investing in the people who drive that innovation. So I look forward to continue to work with my colleagues in the House, both sides of the aisle and both sides of the Capitol, House and Senate, to make sure that we, when we do get to the other side of this pandemic, all Americans, all hardworking Americans are benefiting from a prosperous, growing economy that provides opportunities and delivers success. And along the way is beating back not just COVID, but many other diseases that we've talked about today as well.
Thank you again, Congressman, for your kind words and for taking the time to join us today. I think we're excited to continue to work with you to make sure that innovation in Illinois does continue.
Great.
So perhaps I'll just wrap the program with some quick closing remarks. So the folks on my team know I always like to throw in a personal anecdote when I can. So I grew up going to church every Sunday, and when I used to complain that Mass was taking forever, my mom would tell me that I just needed to find one nugget to take away from the homily, just one. So building off of what the Congressman said at the outset, I would say that my nugget for the day is this. I think it's really clear that the investment that we have made in research and development here in the United States and the partnership across the actors in the innovation ecosystem really does have the power to change people's lives. The Congressman mentioned earlier that the treatment for rare disease, SMA, was developed right in his district. And I am so sure that we are on the cusp of the development of the next generation of treatments for health challenges because of this collaboration that we've talked so much about today, between the folks in industry, the venture capital community, the labor unions, and the government. And I have so much hope based on this conversation that, that there are many more treatments in the pipeline that really will be able to change lives. To shed a little bit more on those treatments under development, the Chamber's Discover and Deliver campaign later this week will release a new interactive map that illustrates where some of these innovative clinical trials are taking place, both in Illinois and across the country. So I'll encourage you to visit our website to learn a little bit more about that innovation that's taking place in your community. It's uschamber.com/discover and deliver. So with that, I would like to thank the Congressman again for taking a whole hour to join us for this program today. To our excellent panelists, to my colleagues, Frank, Charlie, and Scott, who helped make this program possible. And of course, our local partner, the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce, for co-hosting this terrific program with us. So many thanks again to all who were able to join us today. And we look forward to continuing to work with each of you to help tell the story of the power of innovation in Illinois. Thank you again.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you all.